This guide covers all the actions the new Gladiator and Paladin of patch 6.3 learns from level 1 to 50 in order. We go over how each action is meant to be used and recommend ways to use it when relevant. We will not be covering how tanking works in much detail, as I have a separate video on this particular subject that I highly recommend you also take a look at if you're new to tanking. In the summary, we will cover a detailed attack rotation for use at level 50 that encompasses all of the things you learn throughout this guide. Now then, Fast Blade is your starting weapon skill. It is the first step in a 3-step combo, more commonly called a 1-2-3 combo, so at this point you simply use it repeatedly. At level 2, you learn the ability Fight or Flight. While weapon skills incur a 2.5 second recast timer where you can't cast another weapon skill, abilities are unaffected by this recast timer and so can be cast between them. However, using any action incurs about half a second of animation locking where you can cast nothing at all. To make the most of Fight or Flight, you should use it as late in the weapon skill cooldown window as you can, commonly referred to as a late weave. I have shorts both detailing how weapon skills, spells and abilities work in more detail, as well as how weaving, such as late weaving, works. Both described in 2 separate shorts found in the iCards in the top right corner of the video. Generally, you should use Fight or Flight as often as you can and as early as you can, meaning that a fight should optimally begin with Fast Blade followed by a late weaved Fight or Flight. The reasoning is that with a modest amount of the skill speed stat, enough that you may naturally find this on your gear as you level, you may be able to fit an extra weapon skill in the 20-second damage boosting buff from Fight or Flight, but only if you late weave it. At level 4, you learn the weapon skill Riot Blade, the second step of your 1-2-3 combo. Now you alternate between Fast Blade and Riot Blade. Optimally, you would want to use Fight or Flight after Fast Blade if you can fit that extra weapon skill in Fight or Flight. Normally you can always fit 8 weapon skills, but with late weaving and enough skill speed you may be able to fit 9. If you can only fit 8, then which action you use Fight or Flight after makes no difference. At level 6, you learn the weapon skill Total Eclipse, your go-to action for area of effect damage, or AoE for short. Use this whenever you are fighting 3 or more enemies. Fight or Flight should still be used as often as you can in AoE combat. On 2 targets, continue to use Fast Blade and Riot Blade, but make sure to alternate targets so you don't lose the attention of either enemy. At level 8, you learn the ability and role action Rampart, which reduces all damage taken for a while. It is best used early on in a fight when there are the most enemies and you will take the biggest brunt of the damage. Make sure to wait with using it until the enemies reach you, such that it blocks the largest amount of damage. You should not save Rampart for when you are close to death. Use it early and often. At level 10, you learn the weapon skill Shield Bash, which deals significantly less damage than Fast Blade and Riot Blade, but as a bonus stuns the target for 6 seconds. You can use this to prevent spell casts from enemies and stop an enemy from swinging at you for a bit, reducing damage taken. Often, bosses will be immune, but in the early dungeons this is not always the case. Stunning multiple enemies in quick succession in AoE pose can be considered a somewhat desperate tactic, but it is worth keeping in mind as an option. Take note that Shield Bash will cancel your combo. You also learn the ability Iron Will, your tank stance, which multiplies enmity by 10. You should always have this active as it practically forces enemies to focus you in combat. Take note that if you enter content where your level is scaled down, the effect of Iron Will is toggled off, so make sure to check that it is still there when you start. When the buff from Iron Will is active, the button turns into Release Iron Will, which is simply used to turn off the effect again. You should only consider turning off Iron Will when there are more than 1 tank in the party, but in general, it is fine to keep it on at all times. At level 12, you learn the ability and role action Low Blow, which stuns the enemy. This is effectively an ability version of Shield Bash, which means it comes without the damage output loss, but otherwise should be used in all the same scenarios you imagine Shield Bash to be useful. At level 15, you learn the weapon skill Shield Lob. It comes with a massive enmity multiplier that stacks with Iron Will. If you hit something with this, that enemy should stick to you for a long time. Use this for pulling enemies, and try to use it just as the enemy gets in range when pulling with it, so you can do something else when they get up close. You can also use it for picking up enemies that appear during a fight. Take note that Shield Lob does not break your 1-2-3 combo and can be used between the combo pieces just fine. You also learn the ability and role action Provoke. This ability sets your enmity equal to whoever has the most enmity on the target and then applies enmity as if you did 2000 potency worth of damage, which stacks with Iron Will. This makes it a very reliable tool for picking up enemies that appear during a fight, or enemies you lose the attention of. In a group with multiple tanks, you should not use it on cooldown, you should use it tactically when necessary. Combining Shield Lob and Provoke can allow you to reliably pull 3 enemies without stopping when you get comfortable with pulling multiple packs of enemies at a time. In fact, dungeons become available at level 15, and for tanking especially, it is very useful to know a special interaction of your starting action Sprint. Sprint lasts 20 seconds if you use it before you enter combat. If you use it while in combat, it only lasts 10 seconds. So using it just before pulling is beneficial. At level 18, you learn the ability and role action Interject, which can be used to stop interruptible actions. If an enemy is using an interruptible action, the cast bar will be red and pulsing and blinking. Try to time your interject as late as possible in the cast without missing the opportunity, such that the enemy wastes as much time as possible casting for nothing. At level 22, you learn the ability and role action Reprisal, which reduces the damage all enemies around you do. You can use this action when Rampart runs out to soften the damage you receive. Try not to use both at the same time, as that is overkill for most situations. If you know the boss is using an attack that hits your entire party, Reprisal is also a good choice to bring out at that time, since it softens it for everyone, not just yourself. At level 26, you learn the weapon skill Rage of Halone, the third step of your 1-2-3 combo. As previously mentioned, due to the duration of Fight or Flight, it is commonly expected that you can fit either 8 or 9 weapon skills in its buff window. If you consistently can fit 9, then it is completely irrelevant when in your combo you use Fight or Flight, as long as you late weave it. If on the other hand you can only fit 8 weapon skills, then try to plan using Fight or Flight after Fast Blade. However, the damage difference between planning Fight or Flight versus using it on cooldown in these situations are sort of small, so you may also just choose to continue doing that. If you are uncertain about whether you can fit 8 or 9 weapon skills in Fight or Flight, it is better to simply assume you can fit 8. At level 30, doing your class quest line will eventually lead you to the Paladin quest, which is available once you complete the main scenario quest, Self-Management. Once you unlock the Paladin, remember to equip your Soul Crystal to change into the Paladin job. The starting action of the Paladin is the ability Spirits Within. You want to weave this between your weapon skills as often as possible, just keep in mind that it also benefits from Fight or Flight, so consider delaying it just a moment to fit in Fight or Flight whenever this is possible, typically the first Spirits Within in a fight, and then every second one after that. You should also remember to use Spirits Within in AoE encounters, as it does not cost you anything, it is free damage, even if it is single target. The presence of Spirits Within in your toolkit also increases the value of using Fight or Flight precisely on cooldown, rather than even considering delaying it to time it right with your 1-2-3 combo. At level 32, you learn the ability and role action Arm's Length. This ability makes you immune to most knockback effects, and if a normal enemy hits you, its attack speed is slowed for a while. This makes it a very potent defensive tool on packs of enemies. I recommend adding it after Reprisal in your defensive order. At level 35, you learn the ability Sheltron and unlock the Oath Gauge. Whenever you auto-attack an enemy, which happens around every 2.2 seconds, you gain 5 Oath Gauge. Sheltron consumes 50 Oath Gauge to reduce all damage you take by 15% for 4 seconds. If you have a full or near full Oath Gauge, I recommend adding Sheltron as your next defensive cooldown in your defensive order. Otherwise, saving 50 Oath Gauge for a tough spot can be helpful. This does also mean that when you start a dungeon with 100 Oath Gauge, it may be wise to start with Sheltron rather than Rampart. At level 38, you learn the ability Sentinel, which reduces damage taken even more than Rampart. In your order of defensive cooldowns, you should use Sentinel as your first option due to its high potency, or immediately after Sheltron if you have a full Oath Gauge. Remember to not overlap your defensive cooldowns however, as in most circumstances it is unnecessary and excessive. My recommended defensive order is Sentinel, Reprisal, Rampart and then Arm's Length. Preferably, when doing AoE packs, you want Sentinel and Reprisal to be used in one pool, and Rampart and Arm's Length to be used in the other. Sheltron is thus free to be sprinkled in wherever you have it or need it. In fact, if for any reason the damage you take is so severe that you need 2 cooldowns, Sheltron should be the second one that you use whenever possible. At level 40, you learn the weapon skill Prominence. This is your follow-up attack after Total Eclipse. The main difference this makes is that you should now use your Total Eclipse and Prominence on 2 or more targets. Additionally, if you consistently can fit 9 weapon skills in your Fight or Flight buff window, then you should use Fight or Flight after Total Eclipse, as the damage difference between the 2 attacks is massive. At level 45, you learn the ability Cover. This costs 50 Oath Gauge and causes nearly everything cast on the target of your choice to redirect to you, as long as you are in range, signified by the line between you and the target. Be aware that this also redirects debuffs applied by attacks, which means in a raid situation using cover on your co-tank can lead to you getting the side effects of a tank buster. This action is very complex to use effectively, and knowing when is the right time can require a lot of practice, so it is not unusual for the button to not be used much. At level 48, you learn the ability and role action Shirk, which transfers 25% of your enmity to your target. This is used for tank switching. When your tank partner uses Provoke to grab attention, use Shirk your partner to push them further ahead to ensure the enemy stays on them. This is most useful in high level content, but it is nonetheless useful to know how to use it. At level 50, you learn the ability Circle of Scorn, which does some upfront AoE damage, followed by some damage over time, or DOT for short. Due to its cooldown being identical to Spirits Within, you should use this ability together with Spirits Within as much as you can. Remember that Circle of Scorn is also affected by Fight or Flight, so delaying Circle of Scorn to fit in this damage buff window is beneficial. You also learn the ability Hallowed Ground. This is the ultimate defensive cooldown. It makes you completely impervious to most damage, with nearly no exceptions. You can keep this as a last resort, or you can plan to use it preemptively for a particularly large pool or an especially threatening hit from a boss. Its extremely long cooldown does however suggest you should really make sure to make it count when you do use it. If you can, try to make sure to never use it while any other defensive cooldown is active, as they will be completely wasted. Now, to round off, let's cover an actual boss fight opener and rotation. Pull the boss with Shield Lob as you run. If you can fit 9 weapon skills in Fight or Flight, you can late weave it here if you will be in range in time. Then use Fast Blade and late weave Fight or Flight, or if you weaved Fight or Flight after Shield Lob, you can weave both Spirits Within and Circle of Scorn. Then use Riot Blade and weave Spirits Within and Circle of Scorn if they are still available. After that, you simply cycle through your 1-2-3 combos, using Spirits Within and Circle of Scorn on cooldown, and activating Fight or Flight on cooldown. The reason why you may prefer to use Fight or Flight on cooldown regardless of whether you can fit 8 or 9 weapon skills in it, is because otherwise it may lead to you needing to delay Spirits Within and Circle of Scorn as well, which is a bigger damage loss than the gain is from ensuring an optimal Fight or Flight window with respect to your weapon skills. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me and my channel, you can like the video, leave a comment, subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when next I post a video. If you want to give even more support than that, you can also become a member of the channel. Fun fact, despite Paladin receiving a major rework, the first 50 levels only experienced this through a duration change to Fight or Flight and an effect change to Sheltron. The increased cooldown of Circle of Scorn was added with the release of Endwalker, as it used to be 25 seconds.